Okay, imagine this. Someone tells you they're biologically younger, healthier, right now at 54 than they were back at 44. And not just feeling younger, but like with actual blood markers. Fitter than a 20-year-old's even.
Right, that sounds pretty futuristic almost.
Doesn't it? But today we're actually diving deep into the real strategies of a Harvard genetics professor who claims exactly that.
It is pretty remarkable. We're talking about Dr. David Sinclair. He's a professor of genetics at Harvard Medical School.
Right.
And the visual changes, well, it's striking. If you see photos side by side, 54 versus 44, he really does look younger.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's way more than skin deep. He's saying scientifically his body is younger, healthier than ever, with these improved markers, testosterone, glucose, inflammation, blood cells. The works.
Okay, let's really get into this then. Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack Dr. Sinclair's specific strategies, the stuff backed by science, he says, for longevity and health. We want to understand how he approaches what he calls slowing that rate of aging, preventing this corruption of the body's software, and maybe even rebooting it.
Right, rebooting the system.
Exactly. So we're going to break it down. 5 key areas: his exercise rules, his #1 eating habit, the foods he eats, the supplements he takes, and just as important, the foods he avoids.
Sounds like a good plan. And he kicks things off with something that sounds almost, too simple. Exercise. Just 3 times a week.
3 times a week. That almost sounds manageable. Doesn't sound like some crazy hardcore thing for those kinds of results. What's the catch?
Well, the core idea is pretty simple. You need to push yourself hard enough to actually lose your breath for about 10 minutes during that exercise.
Lose your breath.
Yeah, get into what's called a hypoxic state. Basically, your body's running low on oxygen just for a bit.
Okay, and putting your body through that stress, being low on oxygen, why is that good? Seems counterintuitive.
It does, but what's fascinating is that this kind of short-term, low oxygen stress, it actually gives your body a really positive jolt.
How so?
It helps build muscle, it improves blood flow quite a bit, and here's the key part. Your tissues release chemicals that actively slow down aging.
Wow.
And the payoff. He links this kind of exercise, just that 10 minutes of breathlessness 3 times a week, to lowering your rates of various diseases by something like 30%.
30%. That's huge for a pretty small time commitment.
It really is.
Okay, so moving from exercise to eating, what does he say is the most important habit when it comes to food and longevity?
Right. This is where, for a lot of people, it gets really interesting. He argues that it's not just what you eat, but when you eat. That's critical.
When you eat.
Yeah. He basically says our usual pattern, 3 meals a day, snacks in between, that constant eating actually speeds up aging.
So eating less often is the key then. What does that look like for him? And, what's the science there?
For him, he aims to eat within about a 6-hour window each day, sometimes even less, like just 1 main meal.
1 meal a day. Wow.
Yeah, the idea is skipping meals strategically because it's the time when you're not eating that's apparently vital for boosting your body's defenses against aging.
How does that work?
During those fasting periods, your body kind of goes into this deep cleanse mode. It turns on a process called autophagy.
Autophagy, right? I've heard of that. It's like cellular recycling.
Exactly. It's recycling old, damaged proteins, getting rid of the junk.
Okay, and you mentioned defenses against aging. Dr. Sinclair talks a lot about these genes, sirtuins, right? In his book, Lifespan. How do they fit into this fasting picture?
That's a really crucial link. Sirtuins are these longevity genes he studied a lot. They basically switch on when your body senses it's low on energy.
Low on energy meaning low blood sugar, not enough protein available.
Precisely. Not enough readily available fuel. And when these sirtuins get activated, they go to work defending the body against the damage that causes aging.
So by controlling when you eat, you're flipping a switch for your own anti-aging genes.
That's the idea. You're activating your body's built-in defense systems. And it's not just about aging. Fasting seems to have benefits for certain diseases too. Things like type 1 diabetes, MS, maybe even helping with cancer treatments.
Yes, yeah, that's pretty compelling. But practically speaking, skipping meals, eating once a day, that sounds tough. Intense hunger, right? Especially at first. How does he suggest managing that, getting through that adjustment?
Oh yeah, he definitely has tips for that. His main strategy is hydration. Just keep drinking fluids all day. Coffee, tea, hot water, constantly sipping.
Okay.
And he also says if hunger really hits hard, A small bit of protein, like a few nuts, can knock it back pretty quickly.
And the timing, what's a typical schedule look like?
Usually it's something like 16 hours of fasting or eating very, very little, and then an 8-hour window where you eat. So maybe you skip breakfast and have a late lunch and dinner, or skip dinner.
And he does even longer fast.
Personally, yeah. He aims for over 20 hours without any external glucose hitting his system.
20 hours. How long does it take your body to actually get used to that? So you're not feeling starved all the time.
Right, that's key. He says it really takes a few weeks, maybe 2 or 3.
What happens in those weeks?
Your liver basically learns a new trick. It's called gluconeogenesis, making its own glucose from other sources, not just carbs you ate. And once your liver gets good at that, it can maintain a steady level of glucose in your blood. That's what stops the big hunger swings, those crashes you get after a big sugary meal.
Yeah, the energy slump and then suddenly you're ravenous.
Exactly. So steady liver-produced glucose avoids that. But you got to give your body like 2 or 3 weeks to figure it out.
Fascinating. The body learns to self-regulate its fuel. Okay, so during that eating window, say the 6 hours, what is he actually eating? Has his diet changed much?
Oh, big time. He's moved to an almost completely plant-based diet, basically vegan.
Really vegan?
Yeah. And he reports seeing big improvements in his body, his skin, memory, just general well-being. He also points out that many long-lived populations, the blue zones kind of people, they tend to be smaller and eat mostly vegetarian diets.
Okay, so plants. But is it just any plants? Or are there specific types he recommends for, triggering those longevity pathways?
Not just any old plant. He talks about focusing on stress plants.
Stress plants. What does that mean?
It ties into this concept called xenohormesis. It's a term he actually coined with a colleague.
Xenohormesis.
Okay. The idea is that plants, when they're under stress, maybe from drought, pests, too much sun, they produce certain protective molecules. Polyphenols are a big category.
Right.
And the hypothesis is when we eat those stress plants, those molecules kind of signal to our own cells, hey, times might be tough. And that activates our own internal stress response defenses, which turns out to be good for longevity and fitness.
So eating stress plants makes us stronger.
Kind of like that, yeah. They published a paper back in 2003 showing that a bunch of these polyphenols activate that sirtuin enzyme, SIRT1.
So we're talking about things like resveratrol from red wine.
Exactly. Resveratrol is a classic example. Others he mentions are pterostilbene, fisetin, quercetin. These are the kinds of compounds.
How do you find these stressed foods, like at the supermarket?
Well, his advice is look for organic produce grown out in a field, maybe without pesticides. Those plants likely had to work a bit harder.
Makes sense.
And visually look for color. Bright reds, purples, dark greens. Those pigments often are the polyphenols. He even mentioned lab mice, given these polyphenols got healthier, could run further. He said it was like they'd been exercising.
Exercise in a vegetable. That's pretty neat. Any specific foods he calls out that he eats regularly?
Yeah, a few. He drinks matcha green tea in the mornings. It's packed with EGCG, which has anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer properties.
Matcha, okay.
Lots of leafy greens. Spinach gets a mention for iron and vitamins. And olive oil is a big one.
Olive oil, like in the Mediterranean diet.
Right. It has oleic acid, which also activates sirtuin, so it fits right in.
But what if going fully vegetarian or vegan just feels like too much for someone? Does he suggest alternatives?
Yeah, he acknowledges it can be tough. He suggests the Mediterranean diet or the Okinawan diet as really solid alternatives. He actually followed the Okinawan diet himself for years.
What I like.
Mostly carbs, actually. Rice, lots of Chinese or Japanese-style vegetables, soy, and just a little bit of fish.
Interesting. Okay, now let's get to the part I know a lot of people are curious about. Supplements. What does Dr. Sinclair take? But first, any big disclaimers we need to put out there?
Oh, absolutely. Really crucial ones. He's very clear. He does not recommend or endorse specific brands. He doesn't sell supplements.
Right.
And he's a PhD, a researcher, not an MD, not a medical doctor. So this isn't medical advice. It's just what he personally does based on his research.
Got it. Important distinction.
And one more thing he points out, remember how everyone used to think antioxidants were the key to anti-aging?
Yeah, like vitamin C, vitamin E.
Right. He notes that generally those haven't really panned out in studies for actually lengthening lifespan, so his focus is different.
Okay, good context. So, with those caveats, what are his big 3 supplements?
Okay, number 1 is resveratrol. That's the red wine chemical, comes from grapes. He takes 1 gram of it, usually mixes it with a bit of yogurt in the morning.
A whole gram. That's quite a bit, isn't it?
It is a fairly high dose compared to what you'd get from wine, yeah. Second is NAN. nicotinamide mononucleotide.
NMN. Okay, what's that?
It's basically a form of vitamin B3, and your body uses it to make NAD.
NAD.
Nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. It's a molecule that's absolutely essential for life, but NAD levels drop quite a bit as we age.
And why does that matter?
Well, those sirtuin longevity genes we talked about.
Yeah.
They need NAD to work. No NAD, no sirtuin activity.
Ah, okay. So NMN boosts NAD.
Exactly. Studies suggest NMN supplementation can basically double your NAD levels, bringing them back up to maybe what they were when you were 20. And some early trials, actually by his colleagues at Harvard, are starting to show health benefits like lower cholesterol, lower blood pressure. Still early days for large human trials, though.
Interesting. And the third one, you said it was controversial.
Yeah, the third one is metformin.
Metformin. That's a diabetes drug, right?
It is, primarily used for type 2 diabetes to help control blood sugar. So it's controversial in the sense that it's a prescription drug being looked at for longevity in people without diabetes.
Okay.
But Sinclair calls it one of the world's safest drugs. And he points to evidence suggesting that people taking metformin, even if they don't have diabetes, seem to live longer on average. They appear to be protected against things like heart disease, frailty, maybe even Alzheimer's.
Wow. But again, prescription drug.
Yeah,
It's personal choice.
absolutely. Not a general recommendation for everyone to run out and ask for.
Understood. Okay, that's a fascinating trio. Now let's flip it. What does he actively avoid eating for longevity? What's top of the avoid list?
Number one, without a doubt, is sugar.
Sugar. No surprise there, I guess.
Yeah, he calls it the big killer, especially glucose and fructose. Says they're really bad. Strong links to fatty liver disease, diabetes.
Right.
And biologically, he explains how high blood sugar basically caramelizes the proteins in your body. Not good. Plus, cancer cells just love sugar, so keeping it low is key.
Does that mean zero fruit? Or just limiting it?
He advises avoiding too much fruit and definitely fruit juice. Fruit juice is a big one to cut.
Because it's concentrated sugar without the fiber.
Exactly. And he comes back to that idea that your body can make its own sugar, the gluconeogenesis thing, after a couple of weeks of adaptation. He says that liver-made sugar is smarter, more stable.
Okay. Any practical tips for sugar? Like if you're going to have some...
Yeah, he suggests eating it at the end of a meal, which can blunt the blood sugar spike a bit. But he also says, you don't have to be totally draconian. An occasional ice cream isn't going to kill you. It's about the overall pattern.
Makes sense. Moderation, but generally low sugar. What else is on the avoid list?
Bread and high-carb stuff, generally.
Bread. That's a tough one for many people.
Tell me about it. He said he used to eat it daily, like toast for breakfast, cutting it out. He saw immediate improvements in his blood work, especially glucose.
Why is bread specifically so bad in this context?
It's that spike and crash cycle again. Toast, or say orange juice, gives you a massive sugar spike. Your body pumps out loads of insulin to deal with it, which often overshoots, leading to low blood sugar hypoglycemia.
And then you feel tired and hungry again soon after.
Right. That triggers ghrelin, the hunger hormone. So now, with his steady liver-produced glucose, he says he has no spikes, no crashes, just steady energy, better focus, no brain fog. He really wishes he'd done it back in his 20s.
Wow. Okay, so sugar, bread, high carbs. What about meat?
Meat is another one he cut out, mostly.
Even though he likes it.
Yeah, he admits he loves the taste, but cutting it improved his cholesterol, his triglycerides, and that was important for him because heart disease runs in his family.
And the science reason for avoiding meat, beyond personal health markers.
He argues that, basically, plants give you better bang for the buck for longevity.
How so?
It's about the amino acid ratio. Plant protein seems to stimulate those longevity pathways, like sirtuins and another one called mTOR, in a more beneficial way compared to the constant signaling you get from meat protein. Eating meat all the time might actually keep your body from properly activating its anti-aging defenses.
mTOR. That's another one of those cellular pathways.
Yeah, it's involved in growth and metabolism. Modulating it seems key for lifespan. So his take is, focus on plants. He's not against meat entirely, maybe some fish for omega-3s is okay sometimes, but the main thrust should be plant-based.
Okay. Plants over meat for longevity signaling. What about dairy?
Dairy's another one he experimented with cutting out.
Even if not allergic or lactose intolerant?
Right. He wasn't either. But he tried cutting it, and he said things got even better.
Any idea why?
His theory is that reducing the large protein load from dairy, and also eggs, might further dial down that mTOR pathway in a beneficial way for longevity, less constant growth signaling.
Interesting. So sugar, carbs, meat, dairy, anything else?
The last big one is alcohol.
Alcohol. Yeah, the advice on that seems to keep changing.
It does. He points to more recent research just in the last couple of years, suggesting that drinking alcohol daily, even moderately, is really not good for you.
So we cut it out completely.
He did.
And if someone really doesn't want to give up, say, their glass of wine,
Well, channeling Dr. Sinclair's advice based on his resveratrol research, if you are going to drink wine, maybe choose varieties from grapes known to be stress-sensitive, like Pinot Noir. They tend to have the most resveratrol.
Pinot Noir. Got it. Okay, so you put all these pieces together. The exercise, the timed eating, the specific foods in and out, the supplements. It's not just a collection of tips, is it?
Not at all. It really emerges as this whole integrated philosophy, a lifestyle approach, really.
Yeah, and it feels like the goal here is to give you, the listener, the knowledge, the framework, to maybe make some different choices for your own health, using the science to potentially, rewrite your own biological story a bit.
Absolutely. It's empowering.
Yeah.
And thinking about rewriting that story, it brings up a really interesting thought to leave everyone with.
What's that?
How does it change things if you start thinking of your body less like a machine that just wears out and more like adaptable software that you can potentially tweak, update, maybe even reboot using intentional lifestyle choices like the ones Dr. Sinclair is experimenting with? How does that shift your whole approach to aging and staying healthy?
Body as software. That's definitely something to chew on.